the first thing to say is that it's a conversation about staying healthy. It's a conversation about kind of keeping your brain and body right in a business that can be so demanding. Very important to caveat, we're not medical experts. We don't claim to be medical experts. We just think it's important to chat. We think it's important to give a forum where people can say, how was your day? Shit. This went on, that went on. And actually have an honest, open conversation about the fact that life isn't always rosy in spite of what Facebook makes you believe. Email culture always being on, it's tiring, it's hard. We love what we do, it makes you commit more time to it, it can exhaust, it can lead to burnout. And we just kind of wanted to give a platform for those kind of conversations. So there'll be audience kind of engagement throughout. Feel free to jump in, agree, disagree. I don't think we have answers. I think we have experiences. And the intention is really just to share, yeah, that it's going to be tough sometimes, but also some of the coping strategies, some of the stuff we do to keep ourselves healthy in a 27/4 music business. I'm not good with numbers. Don't tell anyone. Darren, over to you.
So, first of all, I'll apologise just for everything I'm about to do and the fact that I look and sound
you're
like
forgiven-ish.
Yeah. This all came about, the discussion, I guess, came about when, ironically, the one guy who's not here, David Emery, thanks to being grounded because of the flight problems in London yesterday and here, he originally wrote an article about a year ago or more. And he basically just said, you know, the working culture in music is toxic and it's endemically bad for your health. He based that on the fact that so many people he knew were struggling with kind of stress and anxiety and depression. And it led to us talking about it. I mean, full disclosure in the sense that part of the reason he wrote the article was that he and I were friends and he knew I wasn't doing very well at the time. But it sort of led to us polling around friends and saying, does anyone else have issues in this area, like anxiety attacks and things like that? And we worked out that about 8 out of 10 of our friends in our networks suffered in some way with this kind of blight upon their lives. I think in music particularly, it stems from a sort of culture in which everybody is made to feel like they're lucky to be working in it, as if it's like a privilege that you get the job. And within that, I think it leads to an expectation of people to be always on, and it leads to a working culture which is enabled by devices that are sort of, leads to this 24/7 thing of, I know the day's ended and it's 10 o'clock at night, but I'm still going to email you about work and all this kind of stuff. Cut to January, and David revisited this with an article where he was saying, it's nothing's changed, it's still bad, and it's not being talked about enough. So I followed that up with an article of my own, where I was saying, I think part of the problem here is equally that what we fail to recognise is not just that there's a health issue here, but actually that it doesn't make us work better. And I kind of do accuse the music industry generally of working quite badly. And I mean, you can't level the blame at everyone, and there are definitely good players and bad. But as an industry, I don't think we're actually the smartest working people. The working practices, there's not enough focus on this. And it's sort of, it's led to us trying to bang the drum more, because actually what we feel is that a lot of people in companies feel they can't talk about this, and that it's not a subject that they're able to speak out about, which I think is a horrible thing. And we did a podcast about this, which you can find and download, where we talked about it some more, and subsequent to that, Chris sort of got in touch saying, well, maybe we should, do a panel like this. And it's just a shame that David's not here as well. But Silvia and Lucy are, so we're all good. So really, I mean, it's, the point of this was just to highlight that fact, but also to kind of speak out about it and try and normalise it to some extent. Like I said, I'm not claiming that everybody has a miserable life. You don't, I'm sure. We're all good and happy. Well, I was last night. I'm fucking not now. But it's, within this, I think it's a topic that needs a lot more coverage and shouldn't be allowed to go away. So it's good that we get a chance to talk about these things. But anyway, I've talked too much. Silvia, do you want to talk a little bit about previous experiences from your side and how you view this topic?
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, the experiences that I'll share with you are from previous jobs that I've had. I can't speak for Cobalt at the moment because I've literally only joined 2 weeks ago, and so far it's been absolutely ace. But that hasn't been the case for a long, long time, actually, in my industry experience, which is sort of 25 years plus now. And I think, you know, touching on what Darren just said, this notion that if you manage to get into the business, you're lucky to be in it. There are, you know, for every one person that's there are 10 other people chomping at the bit who would have your job in a heartbeat if you don't do everything that you're asked to do and work all the hours that God sends. That's been a really, really key driver, not only, you know, in terms of my personal experiences, but what I've seen happening to a lot of my colleagues, a lot of peers, and a lot of people that I've managed in my teams over the years as well. I mean, to give you some examples, when I had my first sort of proper job in the record industry, I was an assistant buyer for the Our Price Records chain, which at that point was the biggest record chain in the UK. It was an entry-level job. I was earning next to nothing as a university graduate. But I was working 12-hour days from the get-go. I'd be the first person into the office at 7:30. I'd be one of the last people out of the office at 7:30 at night. I had about 4 or 5 times the number of different suppliers that I had to deal with than any of my peers, because I was young and keen and just had that kind of pressure on me. And that, you know, I was young then, so even though it was exhausting, I was only in my sort of early 20s, so I felt I had the stamina to do it. It becomes apparent after a while, and as you get older and as you carry on trying to work at that sort of level, doing those sorts of hours relentlessly, that at some point something's got to give. And whether that's your own well-being, whether that's the relationship that you have with your partner, because you're never there, or when you're there physically, you're not quite there mentally, because you're always thinking about work or replying to emails or taking phone calls, and you just have that distance. There is a price to pay, most certainly a price to pay. I'll share with you an example, really from many years ago, when I first had my first panic attack. Not that I knew what that was at the time. I was just conscious that, having gone for drinks with people after work, where I was again doing 12, 13-hour days, day in, day out. I'd been given a second job on top of the one job that I was already doing, solus, with no help. And I was having drinks with some friends, and then all of a sudden I just got up and said, I've got to run away. And I left the pub and I just walked out, and I didn't know what I was doing and where I was going, but I knew that I just couldn't be there anymore. Started hyperventilating. I don't know if any of you have had a panic attack, or kind of, you know, maybe have a sense of what that feels like. But it's quite scary when it first happens to you, and you don't actually know what it is. And thankfully, my boyfriend sort of came and found me and sort of calmed me down, everything, and I went to see a doctor, and I got signed off with stress for 6 weeks from work. And so I had 6 weeks where I was at home feeling like a bit of a loser, because I felt like, oh, you know, I obviously can't handle it. There's something wrong with me, blah, blah, blah. Everybody at work kind of just ignored the fact that I wasn't there, so I had no contact with anybody either, and was just kind of kicking around in the flat on my own, thinking, well, what next? And when the 6 weeks was up, I went back to work, and everyone just sort of kind of pussyfooted around me like I had leprosy or something. And it was really, really bizarre. Now, this was, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago probably. I'm hoping that people have more of an opportunity to talk about things now, and that maybe some companies are better at seeing the signs of stress. It wasn't as if I wasn't sort of calling out for some help. I was constantly asking for some assistance, to get an assistant, to get a shared assistant or anything for the workload, and constantly being told, I'm sorry, but there's no headcount. Hopefully things have moved on since then, but I'm not entirely sure that that's the case. One of the things that I would really recommend is, if you do start feeling like that, or if you see anybody that is struggling, that is kind of a little bit hyper all the time, and never switching off, then try and do something about it. If it's yourself, try and confide in somebody else in your work environment. because they will probably understand the issues that you're going through because they're in the same context. If you see somebody else that may be struggling like that, see if you can just find a way to make sure that they're okay, and just check in with them, because the things that I found is that if you are able to share with somebody that you can trust, and just talk it through without having to bring it home into your home environment, potentially if you can keep it at work with somebody there that cares about you, that can really be a godsend. And I think I've seen it with other people where they've they could have tipped over the edge if they hadn't had somebody to confide in. Not necessarily me, but other people that I've seen in my experience. So that's a little bit about personal experience anyway. I've talked quite a lot now, so I'm happy to hand back over to Darren and Lucy.
So, I mean, the strange thing for me is that happiness is a sort of, it's not really a word people focus on. It's not a qualified thing that you measure, and companies don't look at this stuff. And we were talking about this recently, weren't we, where it's like, people should be asking whether you're happy, and you should try and be happy. And it sounds like such a stupid thing, because it's a sort of an assumption that you're happy when you're just sort of doing stuff. Like when you're not sad, you're happy. And that's not the case. And I find with all of this that the strange thing is that we don't focus on that very much. And it's particularly odd because happy people do better work. And if you're a happy employee, you work better. Your mind is more open, you're more creative. We're a creative industry, even the people in the finance department probably wanted to be in a band, and they're sort of at heart quite creative people. But they, in order to be creative, you can't be stressed. Stress and creativity don't go hand in hand. But did you want to talk a bit about your view on this? It's great us talking about it. You used to work with me.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. I mean, actually, as a weird note, it was like when Silvia was saying about having an anxiety attack, I remember having an anxiety attack and telling you that I was having it in the office. And I was like, I just need to leave. And you were like, that's not good. And I was like, I know. I'm going. And I just was like sweating and just like not a good look. And I remember running out and phoning David Emery. And I was like, I can't, I was supposed to be doing a podcast with him that night, and I said, I can't do it, I'm having an anxiety attack. And I remember David just going, oh yeah, I had that. And I was like, what? And he said, no, when a few years ago, I was in the middle of a gig, and it was like I hit the wall, and I just like ran out of the venue. And I was like, oh, okay, so not just me. And then I phoned someone else I work with, and she said, oh no, I had that. And it's weird how you phone around and talk to people, and they're like, yeah, no, been there, done that. One recommendation that still makes me laugh was to read Mills and Boon novels.
Okay.
But yeah, I just remember that very much, of being in our office when we had the office, and sort of exiting and literally driving straight to a doctor. But that's another story. Yeah. But anyway, but I mean, I'm curious what you think about working practice and happiness, because there's two sides to this. I think there's a personal well-being discussion, and I think there's like a how can we work better, because the two are sort of intrinsically linked, right?
Yeah, most definitely. I think there's a lot to be said as well about sort of how you define happiness, and because I was reading a magazine article actually yesterday on the plane over here by someone who's a sort of presenter and author, and she was saying that previously, and when she was younger, and like you said, Silvia, when you're in your 20s and you start to kind of have all this drive and you think you can take on the world and it's all great and brilliant and yes, come on. And I think often when you're at that stage, you kind of define your happiness by, success and what people think of you and how much you've achieved and how much you've gotten done and, all these kinds of things. And this article was saying that actually, as this writer had gotten older, she's kind of defining happiness more now about, when I've got all these amazing things done, and yes, go out and do it, absolutely. But when I go home, can I switch off? How do I feel then? Do I have a life? Am I happy in myself? With the balance between sort of work and my personal life and my personal happiness. And I was like, yeah, that's a bloody good point. I need to take that advice on board, because I'm finding the same thing for me, I took a long time to get into music. I spent most of my 20s working in other jobs that I hated, and I always wanted to get into music. And I got my first job in music when I was 29, almost 30. And that was 6 years ago now. And then I think also there's a lot to be said. I think there's a sort of balance between responsibility for, you know, managing stress and anxiety and happiness kind of at a personal level, but then also at a company level. But it has to kind of, you have to have both, I think. There has to be a balance between that, because as much as I have worked in the past for companies, luckily I don't now, but in the past I've had similar experience where I've worked for companies who literally had the attitude, and even told me face to face, you know, you're lucky to have this job, 1 million people killed to work here, you know, and they just have the attitude of, you know, I always worked late, and that did get noticed. And in some respects it was good because I got promoted, and, you know, they recognised my hard work and did reward me for it in certain ways. And I remember the owner of the company coming to one day and going, I wish everyone worked as hard as you. And I was fucking dying inside. I was like, if you knew how I felt right now, i.e. I'm on the verge of an actual breakdown, then I really hope you wouldn't say that. But actually, sadly, I think he probably still would, because he was the kind of person that just wanted everyone to work like a robot and had no conception of what you were saying, Darren, i.e. that actually your staff will be much better, work much better, be much more productive when they're happier and they have a balance. You know, so I have worked for companies who have had that attitude, and, you know, definitely companies need to take responsibility. And as you were saying, Silvia and Darren, kind of try and look out for the happiness of your staff, etc. But then on a personal level, I know that I have often in the past, and do now, drive myself way too hard as well, and put a lot of unnecessary pressure on myself. You know, and it's partly, yeah, music is quite an insecure industry, and you do know there are loads of people who would, you know, gladly take your job in a heartbeat, and, you know, you're lucky to be here. And in my case, it took me a bloody long time to be here, and all these kinds of things. But I think I've often put myself, without any pressure necessarily from my boss and things, in positions where I've just kind of forced myself to do way more than I needed to, worked a lot longer than I needed to, pushed myself to burnout when I didn't need to. You know, and as I get older, it's kind of just, you know, I recognise that I need to take responsibility for that as well. It's not just the industry, it's not just the company, it's not just the culture, it's me too. I am part of the problem. You know, so I think all of us need to kind of step up actually and take responsibility a bit for that, and go, okay, within the company, what can I do? Like I said, so, you know, talk to somebody at work who I can trust, try and push back on little things here and there. You know, my calendar often gets insane, and, you know, I have a crazy amount of hours of meetings a week, and I'm trying to learn to actually, that it's okay to say no from time to time. You don't have to be in every meeting, you don't have to be on every call. There are times when you can push back, and again, you're going to be much more productive, and it's better for the company when you do so, because you can get much more done, and then that in turn makes me happier. You know, and you feel less stressed because I'm not running around constantly going back to back to back to back, meeting, call. And yeah, I get lots more done. So it's trying to kind of, yeah, take responsibility for it and work with the company to find solutions, and on a personal level go, I can say no to things, I can limit the time I'm spending on work in the evenings and weekends and stuff. I'm actually trying to say to myself now, I will give myself however long, you know, half an hour in the evenings or half an hour of the weekends or whatever to get shit done for work, and then I'm going to spend this time on, I'm trying to actually schedule more personal time as well, which sounds a bit nuts. And originally I was like, oh, that just feels a bit like work in itself, doesn't it? But actually I'm finding that it works quite well, you know, to try and go, I'm literally only giving myself this amount of time for work, and then the rest of the time is my time, because, yeah, it's my evening, it's my weekend. Yeah, I need a balance. And then I'm much fresher on a Monday, or much fresher the next day.
It's a funny one, isn't it? Because I think half the time with this, it comes down to, you know, there's a sort of your own self-discipline. And, you know, as you said, I think, you know, it was the irony for me, it was like everything that happened to me occurred when I was running my own company. So the joke was on me. You know, it was like, well, you fucking did it to yourself. And like everyone else can go, well, there's always external forces. Mine was like entirely kind of self-induced, which made it all the more ridiculous. And it sort of, I mean, to some extent, I think if you run your own company, it can be worse because there's a sense of investment into it and things like that. But equally, you do have the means to also draw up and say, all right, we're not going to do this. And it's kind of weird now because I feel like off the back of these conversations, you know, with Motive Unknown, we're trying, or I'm trying, I guess. I mean, we're only a 3-man company. But within that, we're trying to say, all right, let's focus on happiness and make it a sort of thing that we're measuring in our daily working lives and saying, how happy are we? Are we doing stuff we like? You know, we're taking on clients because, you know, someone in the company wants to work on it as a sort of passion project, not because it's the most well-paid thing or, you know, whatever else. And it's something we're really trying to actively keep an eye on. I mean, there's a sort of running joke that me and Tom, who works with me, were reading this article about a guy that runs a shop that I think makes surfboards, and he's reduced the company's working day to 5 hours. And we were both reading it going, I want a bit of that. Like, you know, if we can do our job in less time and get smarter about it, and then have more time, you know, doing things we like, then we'll be happier people. Yeah. And that will be something that we'll enjoy more. So it's a strange thing. I think, you know, personally, I feel like we're now trying to focus on happiness as a sort of measured value. But it's weird, isn't it? It's not something that... I don't think in companies anyone looks around and goes, is everyone happy? Because they're like... It's, you know, I think the reality is they're probably just like, I don't fucking care, we're making money.
I think,
you know?
so, I think some companies, at least the smarter companies, will start to realise that even in creative industries, if you try and drive people into the ground by, you know, working them to within an inch of their lives, you're not going to have a happy workforce, you're not going to have a creative workforce. People are going to suffer. And actually, you're going to lose good, talented people through burnout. And, you know, just from a purely commercial basis, that's a nonsense for any business, because that means that they need to re-recruit. You know, you lose somebody with expertise and knowledge and experience, somebody else has to come in and take their place. And frankly, if somebody's left the business because they've been burnt out, and that sort of spreads around the industry as well, how attractive is it to go and work at that place where everyone's kind of miserable and you know, not able to cope? I think, I mean, one of the things that I wanted to touch on was that if you do get to the point where you're able to help manage other people, so if you end up being a team leader or a manager or a head of department, which I've been fortunate enough to do, you know, you can take some of the horrible experiences that you've gone through and learn the lesson and try and make sure that it doesn't happen to anybody else. And that's, I think, you know, from this point on in my career, that's one of my key drivers now for staying in music, is to make sure that the teams that I manage, I want to manage them well. I want to make sure that they're happy as possible. I want to make sure that they're not staying there till 10 o'clock at night, day after day after day, and getting tired. I want to make sure that if I notice those stress levels, the kind of that hypertension, the sweatiness, the agitation, all of those things that I can now see as warning signs because I've been through it myself, if I can spot any of that and I can take people aside and try and work out what's going to work better for them, then I will. It's not always easy, because not everybody else in an organisation gets it or cares that much about the kind of fluffy well-being side, but you have to have people that do, because otherwise everything's just going to be run by accountants and bean counters and people
I feel like to some extent you hit a point now where, as brutal as it is to say it, it's kind of like if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Yeah. Because if you sit around and allow a you know 17-hour day work ethic to perpetuate around you, then you kind of are contributing to this ongoing, you know, shitty working culture that is not good for anybody's health.
Yeah. You've got to encourage other people to go on holiday when they're on holiday. Switch the email off. I'm not trying to be funny, but there is a function on a smartphone where if your work email is on it, you can switch it off and still have your phone to piss about on the internet, watching cat videos and doing Facebook and all of that stuff. That's fine. But I've got to the point where when I'm on holiday, like I am today, so I've taken a day off, I am not answering work emails, I'm not answering work calls. The world's not going to fall apart for me not doing that. But what it does mean is that I'm going to actually have my holiday day to myself. And I think everybody else should try and do that. Yeah. And it makes me really, really sad to see senior people in organisations emailing junior people who they know are on holiday and expecting them time after time to come back and to deal with things that they shouldn't be. Let them go. Everyone needs downtime. Don't make them work at the weekends and evenings and holidays. It's not right, and it's not fair.
And it's not necessary. Yeah. You know, I mean, I think it's part of the problem is that when you work in music, you're so passionate about it and you really enjoy it and you want to do a great job. But then, you know, you end up, like I was saying earlier, putting this unnecessary pressure on yourself, or maybe your manager is, or whatever it is. But, you know, we're not saving lives here. It's not, you know, Darren always says it's not nuclear disarmament, you know. And it's true, as he said, you know, the world is not going to end if you don't send that email tonight at 9 p.m. Does it matter? No. Can you send it first thing tomorrow and achieve the same goal? Yes. Yes. Will you be happier if you leave it till tomorrow morning? Yes. You know,
will it be a more measured reply if you wait till the morning and then write it, rather than type something at 11 which could be garbage, or you could just be completely, you know, in a different world. The quality of what you do is going to be better if you give yourself a rest.
Definitely. And I can say from personal experience, I worked with Darren at Motive, I know, for 2 years, and you know, Darren would always say, don't fucking work in the evenings, don't do stuff the weekends, it's not necessary, you know, I want you to be happy, as he was saying earlier, you know, focusing on the happiness of the team and having a good work-life balance, and, you know, recognising that is super important, and you know, really improves the work that you do, and, you know, makes a much happier working culture. And, you know, from personal experience of having, you know, a sort of manager like that, I mean, oh my God, it makes the world of difference, you know, because then I never felt like, oh my God, I have to do this evening, I have to do this at the weekend. I actually knew that if I talked to him, he would say, no, don't. What are you doing? Stop it. You know, leave it till tomorrow. It can wait until Monday. Yeah. And that's all fine. And that made me feel so less pressured than I, you know, ever felt in previous jobs. And I think my work-life balance when I was at Motive, I know, was the best that it's ever been working in the music industry. No, it's true. Nice. And I'm not just saying that, I'm sitting next to you now.
You should slag me off a bit for balance.
Yeah, exactly.
You were a twat, though.
Yeah, he does have his downsides, you know, but that's a story for another panel. Anyway, well, I mean, you can see the downsides, you know. The drinking, the gin, the hangovers.
I'm just a two-legged fail.
Exactly. But then, you know, on the flip side, as Silvia was saying, no, I'm a manager as well, and I think it is super important. You know, we're all managers, and it's very important to try and look after your team as best you can. And, you know, even if you're not able to look after other people's teams, but, you know, if you can start with your own, and hopefully that sets a good example and might spread within the company as well. You know, I direct manage a couple of guys now, and they are both young, and they're in their 20s, and they're in that stage where they're doing all the same mistakes I did, you know, and just really drive themselves really hard, and they're really just, they love it. They literally love every second, and they live and breathe it, and they do nothing except music. And it's amazing, and they do an incredible job, but I'm always trying to say to them, you know, have a life, have a balance, you know, you don't need to send these emails at this time, you know, leave stuff till tomorrow when you can, you don't need to do stuff on the weekends, because I see them working super hard, and I try and sort of pull them back, because I definitely don't want them to get to that point where they feel like burnout, because as much as you're enjoying it and passionate, if you keep driving yourself, and we all know this from personal experience, everyone on this panel has had this, you do get to that point where you're sick of it and you're burnt out and you just feel terrible, and your body is absolutely crashing as well as your mind, and you know, your relationships suffer and everything else. So yeah, I really try and, you know, look after the team, and if I feel like, you know, one of them's going down a downward spiral or whatever, definitely try and take them aside. And it's helpful, you know, recently I was going through a very stressful period, and a friend in the company actually pulled me aside, and she was like, I'm a bit worried, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, but, you know, and just having that chat, just having someone who's there, you know, looks out for you. And when I've been in the very stressful jobs in the past, I have been lucky to have, you know, good managers or friends within the company as well who've been able to do that for me, and it does help. So, you know, just it's a bit like a, you know, releasing a pressure valve, right? Just being able to talk to someone and having them understand what you're going through, and sort of be a sympathetic ear to listen on, and, you know, there's someone within the company who knows what you're going through and can suggest some possible solutions as well, because I think when you're deep in it, it's really actually hard to keep your perspective and go, do you know what, it is only music, and I don't need to, you know, drive myself to the point of a breakdown just because I enjoy my job. It's okay, you can have a balance. But when you're deep in it, it's hard to maintain that perspective, so it's good. Exactly, so it's really good to talk to other people or have them come to you proactively as well and be like, mate, are you okay? Like, I've noticed you're a bit, and then you can be like, oh, actually, yeah, you're right, I'm going down the rabbit hole, I need to, you know, bring it back. And they can often suggest, I think, possible solutions that maybe you're not able to see at the time, because like I said, you just can't see a way out, and it's easy to become quite negative as well, I think, and because you're so stressed and you're like, everything is bad, and just to have someone to pull you back and go, it's not, actually, it's okay.
Having an
maybe you could do X, Y, and Z to make things better.
You know,
it's so helpful.
I remember when I was kind of struggling, going out for lunch with Fred Bolzer, who's, if he's not here now, he's going to be here shortly. And Fred just kind of completely anchored me down and was like, look, let's just talk this through. And like, I don't work with Fred, I just know him. So it wasn't like it was a professional thing, so we were just having lunch, and I left and just felt completely clear again, because it just like picked it apart and just been like, you know, this is not a thing to get worried about.
No.
You know,
no.
this is kind of ridiculous when you pull it apart. But it's really important being able to talk to somebody else about it. Because within that, being able to say what's going on is critical. Around this whole thing, that I mean, I'm lucky with Motive Unknown. I guess I can say what I like because it's my company, and all I could do is lose a client if they didn't like what I was saying. But, you know, most people feel like they can't speak out about stuff like this. It's quite difficult when you work at companies because you're expected to toe the company line and talk the company talk, and you can't stand up and, you know, it wouldn't do to have Music Ally writing about you going, you know, this is not good, says blah from company blah. Stu. But, you know, within that, it is really difficult. But
yeah, Stu, please can you not do that, by the way? Don't want to get in trouble.
But it's, you know, it's equally when me and David did the podcast, we got more emails in from people in the industry, and they were fucking heartbreaking. Like, properly just made me want to cry reading them. But it was nice in a sense, because I kind of went back and, you know, it was a bit like Chris was saying at the start. I mean, look at me. I'm not a fucking paragon of virtue on any level, nor am I someone qualified to speak about well-being. I mean, seriously? So the replies were always caveated with, like, look, I'm not, you know, in any way a professional on that level, or indeed on any level. But
I can confirm that.
yeah. But yeah, you know, on that front, it was very much about just, you know, trying to help them where you can and trying to puncture that. And it was quite nice because these people all came back going, thanks, I feel a lot better, because someone's called it out for not being normal. Someone stood up and gone, that working culture is wrong and it should not be allowed to continue. And it's a thing where it's like, I don't want to sound like that kind of, you know, raging zealot type person, but all of us are in this room and all of us can leave here and commit to trying to puncture this problem where you see it happening, and you should work more to do that. And you know, like I said, it does sound a bit preachy, but it's so we can all be happier. And isn't that a really fucking strange thing to have to sit here and say, hey everyone, let's try and smile more. It's weird. Sorry, you got a question? Chip in, fella. Go for your life.
You know, like things like how we use emails, how we do meetings. You know, I think having the right attitude is obviously part of it, but actually the processes, I think, is something that we could all be a lot better at. And I just wondered, are there any things that you're doing at your companies regards to, you know, like setting proper agendas for meetings, batching emails, turning notifications off, things like that, that actually aid this process?
I mean, I think I've been lucky because my company's small and therefore like affecting change is very easy because there's only 3 of us. So I can tell you how we do things, and then I guess if you want to dive in.
Yeah, certainly.
I mean, we're continually trying to improve how we work on a personal level. The only notifications I get on my phone are from family. I don't have them on for email because email can wait. I used to get quite anxious if I walked into my kitchen and the fucking light was going on my phone. And I just realised everything about notifications is evil. There's just nothing, there's no upside to a notification on any level at all. So turning them all off is really key. Same on my computer, doesn't have any notifications running. We as a company moved to using a platform called Slack for sort of internal use, and we're now sort of evangelizing that to our clients as well, because Slack takes a lot of noise out of email. It's ostensibly a posh set of chat rooms, but it allows us to work slightly more cleverly because you can get bots and things that plug into it. And where we're evolving as a company is like we oversee a lot of advertising strategy for our clients, so we now have a bot that manages that process for us. So it can give us reports, it can tell us when things are going wrong. And what it means is that Rob, who is our most junior person in the company, who normally had to go and review every ad and look at them every day, doesn't now need to do that. So it's time saved, and we can all do more interesting things. Or, hopefully, just work less, which is not a bad thing. You know, if I get away with just going, it's 3 o'clock, go and pick up my son, knock off for the day. That'd be amazing. So we use Slack, we use those processes. I do bollock my staff if they write emails out of hours. I don't like them doing it. And the only time I've told both of them off is like, what the fuck are you emailing at 11:30 for? Don't normalise weird working hours. That's not right. So as a boss, I'm lucky in that I can put that in, of like, we don't do that. Sometimes we have to. We have American clients, they email at funny hours. That's just how it is. But other times, no, you shouldn't normalise this. Beyond that, I'm just trying to think, really. I mean, you know, in terms of everything else around email and things like that, David always taught me a funny thing, which was like, I never reply to an email instantly. I actually use, we as a company, we run on Google Apps, and I have a great plugin on that called Boomerang, which lets you schedule email. And you can just say, like, send it in an hour. So often, I will write the reply, but it will go an hour later. Because, funnily enough, the more email you write, the more friggin' email you get back. So stop writing emails.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds stupid, right? But try it. Write less emails. You'll have a less crazy inbox.
Oh, I tell you what else you can do with emails, really encourage people not to CC the entire world on an email. I mean, if there's one, well, there are lots of things that I've tried to encourage in teams that I've worked with. One is, if you're working with a team of people and you can actually see them with your own eyes, you shouldn't be emailing them. If you're actually like sat in the same room, or they're just a short walk away, then get up and just go. And if it's a quick question, if it's a one-line email, make it a one-line conversation, because A, you won't clutter up people's inboxes. B, you can get up out of your seat and move around, which is physically good for you as well. So you're not actually just kind of sat there chained to your desk every day. And 9 times out of 10, those little queries don't need an email chain. You don't need to cover your arse by CCing people and filing it away and everything else. And it's also better for actually sort of having a team build to speak to people more. So, I mean, that's one of the things that I think email culture has been really, you know, it's been really destructive, because it's allowed people to basically hide behind it, sit and not communicate in a face-to-face or even just a voice-to-voice way anymore. It's all just like, you know, faceless and personalityless. And this whole thing of CCing loads of people then also just spirals the whole email culture out of control.
Yeah, everyone's diving in, trying to say their piece so that they hope the manager might spot it and see
yeah, and if you are a manager as well, then encourage people that you don't need to be copied on every single thing that they send to anybody. Empower them to make some decisions for themselves and to have their own discussions with people, and CC you in or talk to you about it only if they need your help. Not so that you see exactly what they've been saying, because frankly, as a manager, you won't have time to cover all of that. No. You'll have an inbox of 1,000 emails sitting there, and it'll just be a chain of stuff that you didn't really need to see anyway. And it's, you know, it's not good for developing people doing that either.
Well, you have to ask how much time a day do you spend just archiving or filing email?
Way too much time.
And it's, you know, so in that, I remember having a conscious discussion with a couple of our clients to be like, look, could you just not copy me on everything? I don't need to see it all. If there's a problem, call me, you know, but just, you know, I don't have to sit like the all-seeing eye, you know, on using this stuff. So, you know, in that sense, I think trying to stick with that is good. On a personal level, I really, really don't like meetings. I have a huge problem with them. I just think they're massively inefficient. They take an enormous amount of time, and they're largely a bit pointless. I mean, particularly record label meetings, they're the worst, where you sit round and they go, how's press? And the press person just names every fucking publication and goes, we're going to go for the enemy, we're going to go for this, we're going to go for that, and we're all sort of going,
There are some ways to...
Shite.
There are ways to make meetings more... The meetings that you do have to have, like, you know, because sometimes you do need to sit down with a few people and talk about some stuff in a forum. So a few tips for not spending your life in meetings is... schedule it for half the time that, you know, that everybody else would consider. Instead of putting in an hour in the diary, put in half an hour or 3/4 of an hour, or put in 15 minutes if that's really all that it should take. Have an agenda, or ask the people that are coming to the meeting to have an agenda. And also, there's something that I learned through doing a coaching course, which is called bottom lining. Which doesn't sound quite as sexy as it, yeah, well, maybe. But what bottom lining is the art of communicating your point in as few words as possible. So stop people from saying something and then basically saying the same thing 3 or 4 times using slightly different words, or just letting people talk for the sake of it because they like the sound of their own voices. That's also something that happens quite a lot in meetings, especially in the creative industry, because you've got a lot of extroverts and you've got a lot of chatters and you've got a lot of people that are self-aggrandizing and just trying to be seen. Try and keep it to the point. You can be in and out of there quite quickly, get everything done, and then share actions and minutes, because there's no point having a meeting if all you do is talk about something and then everyone goes off and doesn't follow it up or do anything about it. You may as well not have bothered. It's pointless.
Exactly.
Do we have another question?
Yeah, I wanted to, Darren, you talked about the fact that in small companies, we can make changes very easily. Entry level, so when people are coming into the industry for the first time, you know, out of university and whatever, or they're desperate to get a job on the ladder, we've got internships and that kind of stuff. I was horrified to find out that someone else I know who runs a company not in music was employing a family friend on a 6-month internship. When I spoke to the family friend to catch up, first job out of uni at 21, 6-month internship is not even getting paid a single penny. Working in London, so that's 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, £18 on travel, plus his lunch, you know, to work in Soho. In some of the bigger companies, we've got the same aspect where we say, right, the way to get into the industry is through internships, very junior level positions, where we put a lot of pressure on people from the start. How do we change that element of the business, where we make sure that people have a good work-life balance from the bottom as well as just at the top?
It's very hard, isn't it? But this is what I mean about, you know, it feels like if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. In that I think we all have to try and focus on this. It's like the last person to join my other known was Rob, and Rob is our assistant. But when we hired Rob, it was very much, there was a very clear thing when we hired him saying, you know, this is where we want you to be in 2 years. You know, we need to train you up, and it's going to be quite rapid development, which will be a bit annoying, but, you know, be quite difficult at times. But, you know, this is where the point we want to get you to. And Rob likes that because, I mean, I shouldn't really speak for Rob, but, you know, he tells me he likes it. Rob may be lying, I don't know. But I think he likes it because he feels like he's got a sight of where he's going in his role. And I think that's also something we don't do. And it's like that thing of like, we'll get an intern and then they'll just pootle around, picking up papers after you and all that. And they get no sense of where they're going, you know.
Yeah, Sorry, I was just going to say, yeah, you know, I think as a manager or somebody who's hiring anybody, you know, I think it's really easy to, you know, just think, oh, I desperately need help with X, Y, and Z, and just kind of give them all the shit to do. But of course, it's so much rewarding for both you and them and the company, I think, in the long term, when you do have kind of like longer term, you know, objectives to develop that person and keep them with you and keep them within the company, and you get so much more out of them. Like, we have an intern at the moment, and yeah, there's tons of like day-to-day drudgery crap we could give him, and unfortunately he does have to help with a little bit of that, but we're trying to also make sure that he gets really cool things to do, that he gets to experience the sides of the business he wants to as well, so that he's able to decide better, all right, my next step, I think I want to do this, or maybe I want to go there, you know, just that we're giving him a really good experience and grounding in all different areas, and not just giving him the crap to do, but trying to develop his skills in different areas and his interests. You know, because he's got to finish his studies, but then maybe he'll come back to us, you know, and then he'll be an even more valuable asset to the company because, you know, we've been able to develop him sort of in the first place. So, you know, as Darren was saying, if you are in that position where you can hire people, you know, please do give them sort of the right kind of learning and development opportunities and the chance to develop their skills, and not just, you know, treat them as like, brilliant, here's someone I can dump all my shit on, right, see ya. Yeah. You know,
an internship should be actually about developing somebody. And to your point, now companies are supposed to pay interns the minimum wage.
Exactly.
And especially in London, if there's anyone that isn't doing that and expecting an intern just to get their travel, then that's absolutely appalling and against the law, firstly. Yeah. Secondly, an internship should be developing somebody. It's a work placement. It's about developing them into a junior position. It's not just something where they do your filing for 3 months and then you kick them out the door and get another slave in for 3 months to do the same thing. That's not how that should work at all.
I'm conscious we have to wrap up before Chris bum rushes the stage and throws me out. What I would just quickly end on by saying is that it's worth pointing out that as a consequence of me and David starting some shit, labels are listening, and we've had labels get in touch. I'm not going to name them because I don't think it's right for me to do that, but very large independent labels have got in touch, and you know, it has prompted conversations within their staff where they're polling this. So change is happening, but it needs to keep happening, you know, and I think it would be great if this can be picked up. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd love to see a kind of good employer type thing, you know, where people could commit to a code of practice that ensures we don't treat staff like shit, and that happiness is not something that's just a sort of consequence elsewhere. Whether that will happen, I don't know. But, like I said, at the risk of sounding preachy, all of us in this room work, we do stuff, so we need to just focus on that and try and make more happen. Right, we're done.